All right, everybody, come on in. Come on in. I got a treat for you today. I'm joined by Mike Nellis. I bet many of you already know Mike. He's the man behind the fabulously popular Endless Urgency, which is a Substack publication and a fiery podcast focused on, let's see, beating Donald Trump, fixing the Democratic Party, and lifting up America. It's a pretty good trio of things. Mike's a Democratic strategist. He's worked for a lot of people you know. Look, a generation after Al Gore invented the internet, Mike taught a lot of Democrats how to use it, which is a pretty remarkable thing. He's Chicago's his adopted home, which makes him my brother. Anyway, I'm happy to get to this conversation. Okay, you can hear me?
I could hear you twice, but it just corrected itself. Sorry.
Oh, all right. Well,
Sam must have fixed it. Thank you, Sam. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I hope you heard the introduction, and I
heard it twice.
All right. Look, Mike. We had a week, right? We won a huge election.
Yep.
The memo got lost, and 8 senators decided they would take it upon themselves to blow the chance to end this government shutdown on our terms. But still, the shutdown was a disaster for Republicans.
Yes.
I mean, a real disaster for them. The whole country now knows the president was eager to starve people in order to make a point. I guess starve them because he thought the Democrats would care about that. And guess what we do? And he doesn't. And he announced that from his gilded ballroom. I mean, really, what a mess for them.
Yeah. I mean, I've been calling it 2 steps forward and 1 step backward for the Democratic Party, right? And I mean that literally in the sense that, 1, we showed that we could get on the same page for 45 days and fight and articulate for something that the American people understand, which was these healthcare subsidies. And then 2, we really exposed the Republicans for the cruel, I can curse on here, right?
Just go for it.
All right. With the cruel assholes that they are. And so like they made, in my view, some of the worst strategic decisions I've ever seen of any political party, which is not showing up for work, which was a great talking point for us. This SNAP stuff was cruel and unusual. Fucking around with people's flights around Thanksgiving and the holidays, like that's a mistake. And they just didn't think that stuff through. Now, the 1 step backward is, once again, the fact that we care, that a lot of people in our party care and don't want people to get hurt, gets in our way again. People who, which is fine. I don't want us to not care, to be clear. But we've got to be strong enough to stay in these fights, because if you ask the average American what they think of today's Democratic Party, they'll say, I don't know who they're fighting for, but it's not me. And I don't think they can see a fight to the end. And we proved that again here. So, but I think there's still more good than bad in the last 45 days for the Democrats.
Yeah. When I hear people say that, I want to remind everybody that the Democratic Party is not synonymous with the people who have some important jobs in Washington.
Correct.
That we see the Democratic Party when we look at who voted in that last election. We see them in those protests all over America. And I don't think we're in disarray at all. I think we are about to go out into primary season on audition for some new generals. But I think people are pretty, I don't know. I'm going to ask you this. I think there is a growing majority in America, people who have a sense that government should fight for us.
Mm-hmm.
They have a sense that the money is a problem, have a sense that, I mean, they actually agree on an enormous amount of the issues that normally divide, not the wedges on the corners, but agree on us. And I think Democrats have a chance to capture this great governing majority. And I think now we know the GOP never can.
Right. I think that the growing consensus in the country is around concentration of power and concentration of wealth. And I think if you look at every problem that exists in this country today, from the affordability crisis to wealth inequality to the Epstein files, it really comes down to a handful of corrupt billionaires who control all the technology and all the sources of revenue and are profiteering off virtually every single American, including you and I, Edwin. And so to me, it's getting more Democrats who understand that. And I don't think that's a center versus left, moderate versus progressive style thing. You get a lot of Democrats in the middle who are talking about monopolies and concentration of wealth. I think what we need to do is build a Democratic Party that can win in as many places as possible. And that includes bringing states back like Iowa, which is really only a Trump plus 10 state. I think we have a great chance to flip that, getting Alaska back in with a Mary Peltola, but getting a Democratic Party that's fighting for working people through an understanding that we can break these monopolies, we can break this concentration of power. Because when we've got 5 billionaires that control every algorithm in the country that's polluting our social media feeds, stealing our data for AI, abusing our privacy, and then making a ton of money and trickling very little of it down to the rest of us. It's a real problem, and that's it's just emblematic of every problem in the country. And then you get to Epstein, which is the biggest story of this week. What's happening right now? Donald Trump's Washington is protecting himself and protecting other wealthy billionaires who abused boys and girls, 2,000 boys and girls, through what is basically the largest pedophile ring in American history. And to me, that's the same problem. It's concentration of wealth and power, and a justice system that doesn't work, and a political system that doesn't work.
I'll spend a minute with you on Epstein in a minute. I'm just not ready to go there yet.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, I talked to Michael Mann, who's one of the sort of world's leading climate scientists, and he has left his science. I don't want to say he's left his science behind, but he has been forced to spend all his time now, and he does, writing books and talking about the threat that this oligarchy is caused to science, for sure, because he talks about what's happened to vaccines and how people are profiting off that. We talk a lot about how the oil industry is profiting off making sure no one believes science. And he brings it all back to what it's done to our democracy and our politics. It's the same conversation that you're getting to from the political and governing side. He's come to from the science side, which is, I'm sorry, oligarchies just aren't good for people.
No. I mean, why would they? They're literally designed to help support 10 people that really feel like they should own and control everything. Like, we've got to get back to, I think, look, we've always kind of had an oligarchy, right? You go look through American history, like, how did the American Revolution happen? Well, a group of very wealthy landowners decided that we were going to remove ourselves from England. But when we've gotten this right in American history, and I think you can look at the creation of the middle class through FDR and what happened after the Great Depression, we've been a much better, stronger nation. And I think we're weak right now because the American dream is essentially dead. I saw a tweet this week from, I want to say it was some guy that worked at the Heritage Foundation or something like that. And he said something I think was really true. He's like, the first political party that can get us through this political moment and figure out how to make sure that most Americans can buy a house on a single income is going to rule for 50 years. And I think that is roughly where we're at right now. Maybe that's a little bit too much, but like,
no, literally it's what FDR did. And the older I get, the more in awe I am of what he accomplished.
Yep.
I mean, he was up against the same forces that we have today, and an enormous, just like today, an enormous chunk of the country was part of the fascist party or the KKK. I would say that's part of the GOP or the Groypers. They're out there today. Same forces. And back then, there were people with enormous wealth who wanted to keep it that way because that, they didn't need to be regulated.
Yeah. Well, and I think let's also talk about FDR in the context of how he used power. Like, we tend to whitewash and go, everything that Donald Trump does is like unprecedented, but there are plenty of presidents before him that broke the rules, and they broke the rules with intentionality. Now, like, Abe Lincoln broke the rules for good, and he won the Civil War, and we look back on that fondly, and we don't talk as much about habeas corpus, right, during Abe Lincoln's time. FDR is the same. Like, FDR was a bit of a tyrant in terms of getting his legislative agenda passed, and that's fine. LBJ was also kind of the same in certain ways. So to a certain degree, a lesson today's Democratic
the bounds of the law, right? But they knew how to use power. They knew how to use power, and Democrats have been afraid of power.
Yes, 100% the Democrats are afraid of power. One thing I will say, though, is Democrats are also afraid of the gray space that exists in what the law means and what the law doesn't mean. And if you look at, like, go watch the Daniel Day-Lewis Lincoln movie. I watched this like about a month or so ago. And there's this whole scene where they're talking about the Emancipation Proclamation and whether or not they need an amendment to abolish slavery. And one of the guys at the cabinet meeting is like, well, Edwin, I think his name was actually Edwin, whoever the attorney general was.
Edwin Stanton.
Yeah, it was Stanton. So Stanton said, and Lincoln's like, I don't remember him being too sure that it was illegal. He just said it wasn't downright criminal. And I remember that. And like, I think Democrats need a little bit of that, of like, okay, where's the gray space? And that's what Trump does with everything. Trump finds the gray space, then he'll find the black space and break through that too when it doesn't work for him. But we need a little bit more like, how do we get shit done and how do we get it done quickly? And I want,
which is,
the next Democratic president.
in your adopted city, that's what we do. I mean, the mayors in my city in my lifetime, we get stuff done. And again, mayors around the country get stuff done. I mean, you have to when you're local. Yeah. And I think the abstraction that's DC with all those lobbyists and everybody, you lose track. I mean, like this deal that was cut to end the shutdown. These senators were part of part of their job is to be part of this gigantic movement that's moving America forward.
Yeah.
Another part of their job is to do what senators always do, which is to be there and get the best deal you can. They got confused about which part of their job mattered at that moment, and they defaulted to one that we need a whole lot less of, and we need a whole lot more of. Let's get the whole country to bulldoze what doesn't work, so we can start afresh and take care of people again.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot about who would be the best nominee for the Democrats in 28, both in terms of who can win, but who will be the best president. And like I continue to come back to, I want a governor. I want one of these governors to get in. Like we haven't had a governor since Bill Clinton. And like you look at Clinton, you even look at Reagan. You hated a lot of what Reagan did, but like guys who understood how to get stuff done and how to use the government to like push things forward. And like we have to get somebody outside of DC. Everybody hates DC right now, and for good reason. We can't have anybody that I think touches the Biden fiasco at all. The governors are where to go. So to me, it's like Gretchen Whitmer, Shapiro, maybe Bashir, although I don't understand the appeal of Bashir as much as other people do. I'm sort of like pretty lukewarm on Newsom these days. I think he kind of is made in a lab for Republicans to run against in a presidential election. But I want somebody that understands how to use power and how to get shit done and cares a lot more about delivering for people at a time when, we've gone through, almost 10 years now of like nothing getting done. Just nothing that people can at least tangibly see.
Well, Biden got stuff done legislatively, but it didn't find its way back to our lives. And maybe it would have given more time, but it didn't, and that is why nobody credits him for it.
Well, that's the Ruben Gallego argument from Crooked Con last week, where people were mad at him when he was talking about infrastructure week. And it's like the infrastructure package was good. Like there's a lot of things that are going to be built because of it if Trump allows it to be built. But like people didn't see it. And like projects like the American Recovery Act with Obama is a perfect example of this. The Recovery Act worked really well because Obama could go out on the road and sell it, because Democrats were willing to talk about what we were doing and what we were building. And I remember I was the digital director for the Kansas Democratic Party in 2009. Obama flew out to Overland Park, Kansas, and did an event about a bridge opening. And like I got to sit there to shoot content. And like Biden couldn't do that. And so like that's one of the things is like, and we can go down that rabbit hole if you want, but it's like,
no, I don't.
We had all the disadvantages.
Spilled milk. You have to be. I mean, the president's got a bunch of jobs. It's a hard job. One of them is to sell what he's doing to the public.
Second worst job on the planet.
Okay, what's the hardest?
Oh, being vice. No, I didn't say hardest. I said it was worst job. Second worst job on the planet. First worst job is being vice president.
All right, well, let's turn to politics then, because you raised the vice president, who's just one of the great idiots of all time, and you have been poking him online because he's been a complete fool on the Epstein files. So why don't you talk about that?
When the stories and songs are written about me, I hope they mention how much I hate JD Vance. I think he is the worst type of leader and the worst type of human being. Because I often talk about there are politicians that I know what they believe in, and so there's a predictability to that. And there's politicians that don't believe in anything, and there's predictability to that, which is what Donald Trump is. And then there's leaders that believe in something but won't tell you about it, and that's JD Vance. And I think that's worse. Like there's something that he wants to do on behalf likely of Peter Thiel that he's not going to tell us about, and I don't know what that is, but knowing what Peter Thiel believes in is horrifying. So the thing with Vance is like he is a chameleon. He will say whatever he thinks you want to hear in that moment. And you go back 6 months ago, he was on Theo Von's podcast, and he was like, "We got to release the Epstein files. Donald Trump hasn't done anything wrong in the Epstein files." And like now he goes completely dark over the last 48 hours as Trump is clearly implicated in these crimes. At a minimum, knew about him, if not very likely participated in them. And he disappears. Then he has the gall to show back up on a Fox News interview last night. And he's talking about the economy, and he wants to blame Joe Biden for the economic mess that we're in. And you can't do that. Like you can't. It's bad politics and it's bad governance to do that. They have no leg to stand on, given the fact from day one they've been imposing illegal tariffs on every American and raising their taxes dramatically. So they're just in a bad situation. And with Vance is like, he's not half the politician that he thinks he is. He's not half the communicator that he thinks he is. He won a debate against Tim Walz because Tim Walz was nervous and the media piled on Walz. And now he believes he's Abe Lincoln. Like it's ridiculous.
He is, he's not as unpopular as Donald Trump, but he also has nobody who loves him.
Right.
I mean, and who treats their wife like a political liability?
Yeah.
It's just creepy.
Well, it's also just the fact that he's got, I want to be careful about criticizing people's families because I always just hate doing that. But it's like, you would think with the family and the choices that JD Vance has made, the person that he fell in love with, the kids that he has, he would want to set a better example to his kids. And like, I made this point, there was a few weeks ago, there was this group chat that leaked of all these Republicans saying horrible and racist things. And JD Vance is like, oh, they're just young men. We're not going to destroy young men's lives because they're making jokes online.
You mean those adults who are chiefs?
Yeah, those adults. By the way, most of them were in their 30s and 40s. So I just want to point that out. So like, I'm 38. Would you consider me to be a boy who deserves credibility when I say something stupid? Like, no. But my question to Vance that went super viral that he never answered was, would you be okay if your son said this? If your daughter brought one of these guys home and wanted to marry them, would you be comfortable with that? Would you hire one of these guys? And I think that's a legit question because I don't think
he has hired these guys. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Let's play this game. I'm interested with what you think about the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Who do you think assume that Trump doesn't last forever, but if they win the midterms and they're in power, who do they pick to keep this movement moving forward? I have my choice.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in yours.
So I don't think this.
And then I'm going to convince you I'm right.
Okay, great. You're very good at that. We've had lunch. You've convinced me of many things. I actually used your example in another show. I gave you credit for it about we could pay down the deficit by like setting up chairs and ripping the Trump sign off the. I used that the other day on the show. One, I don't think there's any chance that they can keep this coalition alive. So I'm going to state that up front, which is like the MAGA coalition is done whenever Donald Trump is done, which I believe is in 3.5 years.
Yep.
And now they might build a new coalition and the Republican Party might win again in a couple of years. I don't think that's an impossibility, but it won't be with this coalition. Even if they still call themselves a MAGA, it'll be different. Yep. And by the way, I would note too, the quote MAGA coalition that elected Donald Trump last year was different than the MAGA coalition that elected him in 2016. Very different group of people. If I'm waving a wand and telling you who I think is winning the shadow primary right now, I'll die on the hill. I think Tucker Carlson's running the best shadow presidential campaign that I have seen. The way he talks about the economy, the concentration of wealth, tech companies, I think he understands just enough of what people are pissed off about. And then he plays the culture war game pretty well. I think he's a goof and a loser, to be clear. I don't want to vote for him, but I try to put my head in the mind of somebody that can win all these states, that can win the Iowa caucus. I think Carlson's going to do better than people think.
Okay. Yeah. Fair.
Now tell me why you think who is it?
Here's my counter.
Okay.
I think what's left of the Republican voters is the most radical one and getting more radical and radicalizing worse every week. I think they're looking for somebody who will embody all of that rage against the rest of America. Okay. I think they would go for Greg Bovino. He has been on our streets pointing guns at us. He is their military leader against the left in America.
Yeah.
I think that's who they are.
You really think Bovino would run for president?
I think that's who they want. I think they want a guy.
Well, they want a strong man for sure.
Who has led the battle against you and me and people like us, and particularly against people of color. I think they want a guy who's said, I'm going to the streets. I'm going to take a picture in front of. For those of you who don't know, Greg Bovino has led the ICE CPB attack on Chicago. Yeah. He's the one who's been throwing the tear gas canisters. He's photographed himself throwing tear gas canisters. He took his whole team to the beautiful parts of Chicago, stood in front of one of our iconic landmarks, got a picture of the whole troop, said, say Little Village, which is a neighborhood he's terrified and terrorized. I think he's just the kind of cruel warrior that these guys are looking for.
I mean, I think that's possible. I don't know if Bovino has in order to win, really win, you've got to have a certain riz to you. I don't know how else to describe it. That I think people forget Donald Trump did pretty well in some of those early primaries and some of the things that he did. Now, he didn't do hand-to-hand traditional, throwing out trash at the Litchfield Town dump in New Hampshire stuff. But you got to be able to kind of show up to the Iowa State Fair and do that stuff to win people over, win those primaries. And Trump was actually pretty good at that. I remember he brought his helicopter to the Iowa State Fair and let little kids run around in him.
Yeah. Celebrity helps.
The celebrity helps with that for sure. There's a great moment though. It's one of the most relatable Trump moments. I tell people about it all the time. He lets a little kid up in the helicopter, flies around, kid comes down and goes, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm Batman." And I was it's one of the few times where I was don't.
Yeah, he's talented for sure.
It's in there. It's in there. It's like when people make fun of him for the Diet Coke button on his desk, as if if you made me president tomorrow, I'd fucking absolutely have a Coke button on my desk.
Yeah. So but he's sinking so fast now, and I don't think that's recoverable, even if he does go to war. That in Venezuela.
Well, they haven't explained the war to the American people like that. Like if they're barreling into a conflict with Venezuela. Where is the president ever explaining to the American people why that's in our best interest?
Where has he ever explained how he has a right to kill all those people? He's killed what?
No. Well,
8
yeah.
people? Should just
Yep.
bomb, right?
And that's a long-standing problem in America, which is that Congress is refusing to take up its authority on those type of things, and that's a Democratic Party problem too, because they let Barack Obama kill all kinds of people with drones. And I'm not saying that even with these boats, like I don't know that it's the wrong decision to blow up these boats. I don't know that because I haven't seen all the information. But what I know is they're not authorized strikes; like they're illegal strikes.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And at a certain point,
you haven't seen all the information. You haven't seen any.
I haven't seen any. Like they haven't. Like the president of the United States has not gone and blowing up these boats, and this was why. And like it's problem. But it starts to become like a boulder down a hill, where like okay, Barack Obama is using. And again, I don't shit on Obama. I love Obama. But like we're gonna do a drone strike in Lebanon, which is not a country that we're at war with, as an example. And then that steamrolls into this, where it's like now I can blow up a boat in the middle of the Caribbean because I'm mad at Venezuela, or I'm blowing up these drug dealers. Now that becomes, well, I'm going to do a drone strike in Mexico against drug dealers. And now that becomes, I'm going to do a drug strike against drug dealers in Chicago. Right. And you just start to keep pushing through that and see if anybody says anything. And that's his MO. He wants to see how far people go. You go back to that Jimmy Kimmel stuff, right? And he lost the battle on Jimmy Kimmel for sure, and lost the complete narrative thread of that. If he had gotten away with that, he would have gone 10 steps further to see how further he could have gone on squashing dissent in the world. So like that's
he is. Just he's doing it in a different way.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
he does what he does, and he waits for somebody to try and stop him.
Right.
But it's 80-20. We can stop 80% of it, but 20% gets through.
Yeah, and we are
causes real damage.
I would argue. Yeah.
But he is fast becoming a lame duck. I mean, this last election, I think, put him there. Other people think it's not yet, but I begin to see signs of lame duck, and the Epstein thing is hurt him, and and Republicans are going to vote against him in the House. This Epstein thing goes to the Senate if the House passes it.
And the Senate, I believe the Senate will pass it too. I think it'll be hard for them. They only need 4 votes. I think it'll be hard for them not to find him.
Well, then he's going to veto it.
Right. He's going to be forced to veto it. And that is going to be so politically satisfying for me to watch him veto this.
Yep. Well, and then you got to just get Kash Patel on every camera and say, wear your big boy pants, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Bongino's going to lose his mind if Donald Trump has to veto that. Like, it's a little bit satisfying. It's sad, but it's satisfying.
But at that moment, he becomes an absolute lame duck. Then he's toxic, right? He's plutonium. So once he's plutonium, what do the Republicans? What opportunities become available to Democrats?
Yeah, well, I think let's talk about what his floor looks like first, because I think about this a lot. I think, I basically seen him at like 38% is roughly where he's at. Yep. Maybe he's a tick higher or a tick lower, but like his floor, even in this environment, is probably like 32%, 34%. And then we would need the economy to absolutely implode to get him below that. And like,
you think after a veto, it's still in the 30?
Yeah, I don't think the veto moves the MAGA people. I think he just goes, this is a distraction to the nation. It's a conspiracy theory. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm vetoing this for the betterment of the nation. And that works for, 35% of the country. You lose like, center right Republicans like my dad, but he's already lost people like my dad in this. Yeah. My dad, who voted for him last year, but was pretty reluctant about it. Just because he hates the Democrats, which like is a different conversation for another day. He'll tell me, he'll be like, I hate the Democrats. Be like, me too. Like, I get it. But like, I think it's going to take the economy for him to get into like George W. Bush lame duck territory, where it's like, we have to fucking hide him. Like they had to hide George W. Bush for a while. And the only reason W is allowed back out is because Trump is so bad and people kind of have whitewashed and remembered. Like, I still think George W. Bush was a worse president overall than Donald Trump was. Now, there's 3 more years to go. So there's a lot of time for him to catch up. If the economy collapses the way that I think it's going to, the way that it did under Bush, the way that I think the job market is really bad right now, especially for young people. I think he's gonna beat him on that. And then his floor was like, Bush left office with like 24% approval. Like it was pretty embarrassing. So I think that's what happens. And then you find out if the Republican establishment can get one hand back on the wheel in these primaries anymore. Can they nominate somebody that is, a Glenn Youngkin type? And I think Glenn Youngkin would still lose in a general election, but he would be like a relatively normie candidate. And then you go into a GOP civil war to figure out what the future of the party looks like. And also that's predicated on the idea that Democrats don't also have a very messy, bloody civil war where we nominate a candidate that really hurts us. And I think that's part of what scares me about the Democratic Tea Party idea is that we start to nominate people who make us feel good in primaries because so many people have left the Democratic Party to become independents. And so now we're stuck with like a lot of people who are really mad and they pick like a Gavin Newsom type, you know, and like, I know Newsom's making people really happy, but if you look at just the pure numbers, he's one of the least liked politicians in America. Like people do not like him. And so like, I think he has value.
Well, people don't like any politicians they know well right now. So people, you know, that's part of the problem. I mean, any politician who stepped into this mess is got a lot of negatives. I do think the primary process is going to be good for us. I think it's going to be good for us.
Well, I think
we'd had one before.
One of the things that's hurting the Democratic Party right now is that we didn't have a full primary process a year and a half ago. And I'll make this case for, and it's a little bit insider baseball for people, but like one, like let's say Joe Biden decides not to run in the beginning of 2023, which would have been by far the better choice. Kamala Harris is very likely the front runner. She either rises to the moment and becomes a better candidate for the general with a better team around her, or she fails and somebody else takes the mantle from her and we're in a better spot regardless. But what's missing is when you have 10 or 15 fully funded Democratic candidates, you build a new bench of talent, you get new staffers who join, you recruit people into the system so we get more people to go, you build new technology. So there's all this innovation that happens. Democratic Party didn't get any of that innovation in this last election cycle, and it sucks, drives me crazy.
And one more thing. When you have that kind of primary, you get the nation's attention.
Yes.
The media's like, what's happening in that primary? And what happened instead, in part because Joe was not out there in public, was that all the attention during all that time, it would have been on Democrats and where they want to take the country, was on Donald Trump and his court and what was happening to him and what he was saying about what was happening to him. So Donald Trump dominated the news during the months that should have belonged to Democrats talking about the future, and it didn't.
And he allowed, and by like, look, I mean, Joe Biden was running for re-election. So like one of the many sins of his presidential campaign was not hammering Donald Trump every single freaking day. Like that they should have been hammering him every day on TV in digital ads. He was able to take his net favorability up dramatically and people started to remember him fondly and they forgot about, I mean, people forget about January 6th and stuff like that. And they go, fuck, my burrito bowl is expensive and I can't afford to put gas in the car and I can't find an apartment building that I can afford to rent because it's too expensive. So like they're going to get mad about that stuff. And Andrew Yang said this right after the election. People got really mad at him, but I do think it's right. It's like, if you give people two shitty choices, they're going to pick one. And that is like one of the foundational principles of American politics. Yes. And so, you know, a lot of people went, God, I fucking hate Donald Trump, but everything's so expensive, I'm going to kick him out. Or, man, I hate the Republican Party, but Democrats are covering up Joe Biden's health. I can't reward that, you know, and that's how people think.
Well, I mean, so you bring me back to FDR. I mean, Herbert Hoover, there was a lot I didn't like about his, I'm not sorry, I'm not that old. In reading, there's a lot I didn't
I was going to say, I was like, wait a minute.
His policies, right? But
like,
what
I remember being a young lad and listening to Herbert Hoover talk on the radio.
Called them Hoovervilles while he was president. Yeah. You know, all that stuff happened because FDR didn't waste 1 minute making sure that everybody knew whose problem it was.
Yep.
You know, and I mean, Trump's trying to blame everything on Joe Biden and Democrats. The problem is it's so preposterous that people don't believe him. But in this case, Biden missed the opportunity to permanently bury Donald Trump. And since he told us that Donald Trump was the greatest threat to democracy, his failure is unforgivable.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And it's going to rank Biden pretty low as a president, even though his legislative accomplishments are more impressive than people give him credit for, including me earlier in the show. So I'll just clean that one up for later. But I think the one thing I will say is that right now, this version of the Democratic Party does have more of a killer instinct to blame Donald Trump for friggin' everything. And I'm enjoying that. I would argue I'm one of the architects of that. And not alone, to be clear, but like, it's just like, I love this Democratic Party's ability to just boom, boom, boom. It's this guy's fault. And this is why. No. And like, the only thing I want the Democratic Party, as we nominate our candidates in the midterms, but certainly our candidate in 28, is to be able to go one layer deeper on Donald Trump. And I think about this a lot. It's because Trump is a symptom of a broken system, a system that is fully functioning and healthy, never elevates a man as corrupt and ignorant as he is to the presidency. And we need to be able to articulate that to people. When Obama ran for president in 2007 and 2008, he had a critique of George W. Bush in the system that rose above that with what we believe to be a plan to fix it. I would argue that he didn't. And there's
Do
a lot
it,
of
right. Yeah.
Democrats have to have that. And I'm looking for the candidate that can do that. And then I'm also looking for the candidate that I think can use power more effectively, because again, I keep coming back to this. Barack Obama got elected with 59 Democratic senators, eventually got to 60 with Arlen Specter switching. Like, what could we get done with that right now? We wouldn't even have to nuke the filibuster. Like, so
although I'm happy nuking the filibuster.
Right. I'm happy nuking the filibuster too. Did you see this clip of Trump last week? And he was like, we have to nuke the filibuster. Otherwise, when Democrats take over, they're going to nuke the filibuster. They're going to make DC a state. They're going to merge the Dakotas. They're going to.
And I'm going, yay!
Yeah, and I'm going, yay! Tell me more what we're going to do, please, 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 please.
Yeah. I thought, like, okay, for the first time, I'm all for it. You bet we'll do all those things.
Yeah, they're right to be terrified of that, because, by the way, they have governed in the last, how long has it been? 11 months. The last 11 months, like, they are never going to lose another election, and I'm worried that they're going to try to fuck with the midterms and stuff. But we proved that we can win another election again, and I think they went from like, man, we've got a coalition forever, to, oh no, the Democrats are going to be back in power. And like, I would be fucking terrified of the Democratic version of what Trump is doing right now, because it would be good for people. Like 80-90% of Americans would succeed and thrive under that.
Yeah, I think we would. I mean, so I want, in addition to the two areas that you want, make sure Democrats are strong at going into the next election, I want them to articulate, and it's because particularly resonates with me, but I think we need to explain to everybody why a functioning democracy is good for people, why it actually matters that you, not the map makers and the money, are the ones that the legislators are accountable to. Because when you do that, you end up with better outcomes in your lives. You end up with better schools. You end up with better roads. You know, if they're only accountable to the money and the map makers, it doesn't matter what happens to you. And that's where we've gotten to with this oligarchy. And I hope that somebody will explain and take the time to explain that we're in a like moment that Madison was in. We need some people who will get elected, who think about power and how it's structured in America in a way that works for people again.
Yeah.
I
want someone to get elected that understands that. I don't want a technocrat. Like, I'm going to fight anybody that I think is going to be technocratic so hard in every election for the rest of my life, frankly.
Tell me what you mean technocrat.
Technocrat meaning that when they get into power, they're just going to rebuild the system as it was before. Like, I've seen a lot of people be like, we need to elect somebody who's going to bring USAID back. And I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. It's not. USAID is dead, and like, we can build a new thing, but like, USAID was broken in its own way. I think what they did was horrible, but like, we're not going to rebuild these old systems and processes and structures. We have to build something new.
I feel like that this horrible administration has given us an opportunity to build something wonderful going forward. Every old institution, and the U.S. government is an old institution, has accretions that make it harder and harder for it to innovate, harder and harder for it to do to meet its mission. And that's always true. I was part of reinventing government when Clinton was president, and we moved the needle, but it was very hard, and there was a ton we didn't get to. In part, it's going to be in some ways easier because of the amount of destruction.
Well, and imagine if you had the leash that Donald Trump has given his people to go fuck shit up, basically. Like, if you had that in the 90s under Bill Clinton, you would have been able to accomplish probably 10 times as much as you did.
But I'm not sure it would have worked. I mean, it's easier to break things with that kind of leash than to build them. Well, the biggest successes the government had were when we would talk to the people who were actually working in government and saying to them, okay, this is the mission. What is it about how we do things that's in your way? And they knew better than anybody else what processes, what regs, what, silly habits were causing us to not be able to meet our mission. Yeah. And sometimes it was, we need different legislation. And sometimes it was, these 4 chapters of the CFR or a mess, or sometimes it was just how we operate. We don't need 80 employees to do this. All of that, the building is hard, but they broke it. So now we have a chance to rebuild it. And anybody who says, just put it all back is a fool.
Yeah. And I'm going to fight that mentality for that. I'm also going to fight this sort of like shallow politics that are out there. Like, Eric Swalwell was like, the next Democratic president should bulldoze the new ballroom. And I'm like, nope, we can find more creative uses for the ballroom. Like, they're going to have spent.
I'll wait till it's built before I
mean, it's going to be gaudy and ugly as hell. I mean, we're going to take down all that gold fixture shit that they've done, and like the presidential walk of fame and like all that. I don't know why they had to. I saw maybe it was a comedian this week said something that was like, he's turned it into like a Baghdad strip club or something like that. And I was like, Jesus, that is like very accurate for how I view it.
I want Mar-a-Lago to be the next Smithsonian Institution Museum of American Fascism.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's just like taking General Lee's house.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Just turn their terrible symbols into something great.
Yep.
Hey,
I love the story of taking General Lee's house where they ran out of space to bury bodies, and the general who was in charge was just like, and he buried his own son there. That's the first person he buried. He had no room for his son, and he went, bury him in Lee's front yard so he can never come home. Yep. I love that story.
Love that story. All right, before we go, because we are over time, tell everybody how to sign up, how to join, how to follow you online, because they should.
Yeah, go to endlessurgency.com to subscribe, to find the content. We'll have a couple of shows up today. We'll have I did a show with Katie Fang today, did a show with Joe Walsh today. I usually publish 2 or 3 rants a week. So if you're looking for like a very formal newsletter, you're not going to get one. It's usually me picking up my laptop and writing for 20 minutes and then just like sending it out to people and being like, I hope there's no typos in here. But we've got an amazing community of people that watch and engage. You can also find me on YouTube. It's Mike_Nellis. I'm either Mike Nellis or Mike_Nellis on most social media platforms. I'm on Threads and Twitter. And everything on my Substack is free, by the way. Like I want the content to be useful to people. I have a day job as a Democratic strategist. I have a couple of, I'm an entrepreneur, so I have a couple of businesses I run in the space that do well. So I didn't start this to like make a bunch of money. I use the money to we're building a content studio and we're hiring staff and I pay the staff a living wage. But, if you want to join, it's endlessurgency.com, and I'd appreciate anybody who wants to be a part of it.
All right. So please, everybody, Mike is terrific. You should follow him. You should follow me too, but follow Mike.
Please follow Edwin. Edwin's great. And if Edwin will take you out for tacos, always say yes to that, by the way. He's a great hang.
Yeah. And speaking of doing that, all of us in Chicago are out supporting all of the immigrant neighborhoods that have been so badly hit. So if you're listening and you're in Chicago, go spend some money in Little Village. It's fabulous. Go spend money in Pilsen. It's desperately needed.
Little Village is like a ghost town right now. Like there's so many businesses that are going to go under. It's awful.
It's awful. And by the way, and the businesses are lovely and they can use your support. So
lots of good food down there.
Yep. Great. All right, Mike, let's make a date to go there for dinner sometime soon.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.